Well, I am so blessed to be able to announce our guest speaker. Obviously, the first service he was speaking, and just amazing, the brilliant mind that this man has. He's a wealth of information. You're going to have a history lesson here, and I pray that, I don't even know if you can write fast enough because he talks so fast. So it's so funny, after the first service, somebody was here and they said, I tried to write notes, it was too fast, so I'm just gonna review I'm gonna watch it again and start writing notes and maybe put it on slow, or stop it so I can write all these notes. So Seth Gruber is our guest speaker. He's not a guest because he's a great friend of ours. We love him dearly. He's been here many times. He is a good friend. We love him. His father even attends here. He's here, David. His father attends church here. And he is a wealth of information. He is standing strong when it comes to life, and probably one of the biggest voices we have in America when it comes to life, for standing for life. So welcome, please, Seth Gruber.
Good morning. What a pastor, huh? It's like, I believe this about Jack Hibbs and Joe Pettick. If I could bottle the spiritual, moral, political courage and clarity of Pastor Joe Pettick and inject it like a booster shot into the arms of American pastors, I could end abortion in this country in 1 year. Well, it's a booster shot, so it probably wouldn't work. So, good morning. Welcome to Calvary Chapel, the Harbor. Good to be back in Southern California, born and raised in Whittier. I didn't flee California. If I had fled for political reasons, Jack Hibbs might have disowned me and called me a coward, and rightly so. No, I'm just kidding. But we moved to Kansas last year because it's where my wife's family's at, and we had the third baby on the way, and she just needed that family support system. So we didn't flee to the Midwest. We went to the Midwest for support so that we have a healthy family, and I don't kill myself and ruin my family by fighting abortion. Because the family actually comes first. And who understood that was Margaret Sanger, the patron saint of feminism and the founder of Planned Parenthood. That if we can attack the family, dismantle the family, then everything after that kind of just follows naturally. And it's crazy reading some of the weirdo sexual revolutionaries on the left, back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, like their hatred of the nuclear family and like God's ordainment of the family is pretty sick, but it should tell you everything that you need to know. Like Alfred Kinsey once said, he said, the whole army of religion is our central enemy. Margaret Sanger once said, birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian church. Isn't it nice I memorize all this junk for you so you don't have to read these people? That's a direct quote from the founder of Planned Parenthood. But Seth, I thought birth control is just to help poorer families plan their parenthood so they don't have too many kids, and then they won't be as good kids because they won't have as much money and they'll have too many kids. No, Sanger, the woman who coined the term birth control, did you guys know that? That term didn't exist until Margaret Sanger. She coined the term birth control. And she said birth control appeals to advanced radicals because it's calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian church. Well, why? Well, because the first commandment in the scriptures is to be fruitful and multiply. So naturally, the revolutionaries on the left say, well, we can't have people, well, Sanger said swarming and spawning. We can't have them swarming and spawning too much. Having too many kids, overpopulation, isn't too many people on planet Earth. And Sanger was influenced by all these individuals. Attack the family, dismantle the family. Have you noticed this about Black Lives Matter Incorporated? Did you ever go to their website in 2020 or 2019? They said, we exist to disrupt the Western contrived notion of the nuclear family, which has done more damage to Black America than anything else. LBJ, Great Society Act, Black mothers only got payment checks from the government if there were no fathers in the home. Why does it always go back to the family? So anyways, all that to say, I moved to Kansas so that I didn't kill myself and my family. So my wife was happy wife, happy life. So it's good to be back in Southern California for a few days here, waking up to church at one of my favorite churches. So thank you so much for having me. So let's see where we begin to put this puzzle piece together. Anyone asking the last 3 years, what the heck's going on in America? Or how about this? How did we get here? Am I the only one who's felt like that? Okay, good. Or where is the church? You see, things happen gradually, then suddenly, just like bankruptcy. right? Let's say you've lost your business, you made some bad financial decisions or something. You go to your wife and say, hey, babe, I lost the business. And I don't know how this happened. Your wife would be like, babe, you've been making horrible financial decisions for decades. Like, what do you mean, how did this happen? Do you understand, like, things, like, bankruptcy happened gradually. And then you lost your business. And you're like, ah! What if I told you the same thing is true of culture, politics, and ideologies? That things happen gradually. And then when the dam breaks open, and you're like, oh my gosh! Drag queen story hour at the library happened really fast. And some Americans feel like that. They feel like that happened really fast. It didn't. It happened gradually for decades. Codifying abortion through the point of birth with Prop 1 of the California State Constitution, and 4 days ago in Ohio, and the last year in Michigan, and then Vermont. Wow, that happened really fast. No, it didn't. All this stuff happened gradually for decades as bad seeds were planted into the soil of the American Republic. And guess what? Bad seed yields a bitter harvest. That's a biblical concept, by the way. The Bible talks about bad seed, bitter harvest. So if the harvest is bitter, you might be able to predict what the seed was. And if the seed was bad, you could probably predict the harvest. In Hosea 4:6, God tells the Israelites, he says, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. What I'm going to get into and share with you for the next few minutes. I've done 35 churches in the last 15 months. And here's the number one response of godly, pro-life, conservative Christians I get in the foyer of churches afterwards. Seth, I've never heard any of that before. We're being destroyed for lack of knowledge. We don't understand the ideology of the enemy, nor the acolytes that the enemy of our souls has raised up to advance his ideology in the public square. Gradually, and then suddenly. And I'm here this morning to suggest a very simple thesis, but a very audacious thesis. And that is this. All of the hate of the modern era flows through Margaret Sanger. Now listen, Bill Federer is a good friend, okay? Although I'm not going to go as long as he does. But I'm not going to pretend to know history like Bill Federer. I don't think I'll ever be as smart as that man. Okay? And maybe you're thinking, Seth, you're no historian. How could you make such a claim? That's a little reductionistic. That's a little oversimplification of history. Really, one woman explains everything in 2021, 2022, 2023. That's just stupid. You obviously were not homeschooled. Actually, I was. And there's no way that that's like a rational argument you could make one individual. Correct. We could go back to Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. We could go back to the Enlightenment and some of the weird kooky things we got wrong there. There's a lot of places we could go to explain the last few years that makes us when the dam broke open, we were like, what's happening in America? The reason that I have selected Margaret Sanger and the founding of Planned Parenthood is because Planned Parenthood is the largest, best funded, and most profitable 501c3 in human history. This is a nonprofit. The largest, best funded, most profitable nonprofit in human history. And that hasn't been true since the 70s or 80s. That's been true since the 60s. One organization, the largest, best funded, most profitable. In 2023, Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. But Seth, I was told they were an abortion organization. Planned Parenthood is behind all of the comprehensive sexuality education. The porn. There's like gay porn cartoons. Have you guys ever looked at the curriculum? I hope you haven't had to, but I mean, it's a vile. Sometimes it's books that elementary school kids can check out of the library, but sometimes it's in the curriculum for the Sex Ed Health Week in elementary schools, junior high schools, public high schools. Planned Parenthood is the one that launched the organization that put all that stuff together. So they're behind all the diddle the kids, titillate the kids, incite youngsters to a sexual frenzy. They're the largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. And in 2023, as of today, Planned Parenthood is currently making more money off of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers than off of baby killing. Yeah, like their profits are bigger from the gender delusion stuff than from the child sacrifice stuff. Yeah, I don't sound so kooky anymore, huh? It's not just an abortion organization. It's the Leviathan. It's the culture of death. And I'm going to argue that there is no other individual in American history whose impact on today's wickedness is greater and better financed and funded than Planned Parenthood and their patron saint, Margaret Sanger. It's actually no different than Judges 6. Do y'all read the Old Testament here, right? Yeah. Judges 6. In Judges 6, we find Gideon hiding out in a cave. Now, why is Gideon hiding out in a cave? Because they had Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism. It was democratic, which is, I've been told, is better than normal socialism. I'm not sure how that works. I think it's something like if you vote your way in, you have to shoot your way out, something like that, but it's democratic. And so you remember in Judges 6, the Midianites are oppressing the Israelites. Do you guys remember this? And because God's given them over once again to be ruled by those who hate them. And so the Israelites thresh their wheat and the Midianites come and take it, right? You make, we take. That's socialism. So Gideon says, screw this. I'm going to go hide out in this cave and thresh my own wheat. So he's a tax evader. Naughty Gideon. By the way, Pastor Joe, I'm not giving your church theological arguments to cheat on their taxes. Sorry. So Gideon's threshing his own wheat, and then God comes to Gideon in Judges 6, and he says, mighty man of valor, reminds him of his identity. Now, if you're Gideon, what are you thinking? Here's what I'd be thinking. Where have you been? Our grandpapas told us that you were the God that brought us up out of Egypt, that you deliver us from the hand of the oppressor, that we were your special chosen people. Where's the milk and honey? This sucks. Everything we make is taken by our enemies. I thought this was a theocracy. I thought you were our God, our monarch. But then I get excited and I'd be like, God's back. It's time to make some Midianites' heads roll, baby. You know? Is that where God starts? Does he say, go slaughter the Midianites? It's very interesting. In that same chapter, this is your homework this morning, go read Judges 6. Sorry, I'm not preaching expositionally, okay? I love Calvary Chapel. I wish I could preach as well as Pastor Joe, but I just kind of like crazy and like probably on the spectrum, so I'm just like putting all these pieces together and trying to use the Bible to help you to see so we're not destroyed for lack of knowledge. And so God tells Gideon in Judges 6, he says, walk out of the cave and go tear down the statues to Baal. Then take those Asherah poles and chop them up. Then we'll talk. Well, God, why didn't you start with like our border policy or like, you know, our election security or, you know, our self-defense gun rights? By the way, I'm a gun-toting, Second Amendment free speech. Like I'm saving up for my next gun right now. So like, and I know half the congregation's packing right now, you know, so but my point is this, is like all that stuff is important and matters, but none of it matters if we continue to kill children in this country. As it was in Judges 6, so it is today. God doesn't begin with these other, you know, preferential important issues that we probably all agree on. What does he say? Well, he's given his people over to be ruled by those who hate them. What are his high kingdom priorities? How does he show his priorities? And yeah, can I actually say the things that he puts in a moral and spiritual hierarchy? You ever hear Christians say, all sin's equal? No, it's not. All sin puts us on an equal playing field before the cross. Nobody thinks stealing a pencil is the same as killing your kid. Not all sin is equal. God actually has hierarchies of certain things. It's 7 things the Lord detests, 8 that he hates, abhors, right? It's all in the Proverbs, Psalms. Okay. So he says, you start tearing down the high places. What were the high places? It's where they would erect idols to pagan worship. Asherah was the goddess of sex, and they would worship her through orgies and unbridled sexual escapades. Baal, Moloch. Baal is sort of like the, like the demon, like god over Moloch. It's kind of like the demon that the other demons are accountable to. Baal's kind of like the hierarchical demon. You understand that like little bronze statues and idols are just demons, right? So Baal, child sacrifice. Right, because when you like sleep around and have orgies and like have sex with everyone, what tends to happen is 9 months later you have an unwanted baby. But that's okay, just walk over to the Baal statues and pass the child through the fire. What are the 2 pagan gods of American culture today? Sex, child sacrifice, the Asherah poles, and Baal, as it was in Judges 6. So it is today. The more things change, the more they stay the same. What if I told you that Judges 6 provides the perfect window into understanding how Planned Parenthood operates and the culture of death? Augustine, in his book, The City of God, called it libido dominandi. I know, think about the phrase for a little bit. Okay, it's all right. The kids all went to kids' school, kids' surgery. Libido dominandi. sexual liberation is political control. Dominandi. Sexual liberation as political control. It's a line that comes from Augustine's City of God. What does that mean? That if you can sexualize a community, which is what Asherah would sexualize any community. If you can I put it this way? If you can titillate the masses, the sex ed in the schools, incite children to a sexual frenzy, if you can debase people to their most animalistic sexual appetites, feed me. Maybe it's food, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's sex, but feed me. And you can get them to indulge those appetites like an animal, right? Then they're actually not free, they're actually enslaved. And so actually they're easier to control. Sexual chaos, sexual liberation creates docile citizens who can no longer govern themselves. Right? Do you guys know any addicts? Don't scream it out, don't say their name, but I'm just like sex addicts, drug addicts, alcohol addicts. We know some where we have people in our lives, families, very sad, right? Aren't they wonderfully involved citizens? Never late for your kids' birthdays, always on time to church, super reliable, always keep their word. I'm not trying to be a jerk. What I'm trying to say is that addicts, particularly sexual addicts, are not free, they're enslaved, so they can't govern themselves anymore. Libido dominandi. And child sacrifice, historically, has always been the conclusion of sexual liberation or the sexual revolution. It always ends in killing children. The more sexualized the community becomes, it's actually children's rights that suffer the most. Every single time. It's the same two pagan gods today. So, how is Planned Parenthood the Asherah poles and the Baal statues today? How is understanding Judges 6 in salvation history the window into understanding the chaos of the 21st century in particular, but certainly of the last 60 years in America? Well, we got to go back. Chesterton once said that happy is he who knows not only the hidden causes of things, but who has not lost touch with their beginnings. The Bible talks about the sons of Issachar. They were the men who understood the times, so they knew what Israel ought to do. That's all the Bible says about the sons of Issachar. So they understood the times, and so they knew what the people of God ought to do. So with an understanding of the times comes a responsibility and duty to act in accordance with those times, in accordance with what you know. So in 2019, the New York Times, the gray lady, all the news that's fit to print, released the 1619 Project. Y'all remember this? And they argued that our birthday as a country is not 1776, it's 1619, when the first black slaves came to American shores. That's our real birthday. That's actually what the 1619 Project said, okay? And they said because we're such a systemically racist country today, right? Like LeBron James said, when black men walk out of their house, they're being hunted. That's what LeBron James, yeah. And so to understand our allegedly systemically racist culture today, they're saying what I'm saying, they just got the formula all wrong. They're saying we got to go back to 1619. That window, that date of the first black slaves coming to American shores is so representative of our evil, bigoted, systemically racist culture today that it justifies the summer of love, mostly peaceful, somewhat fiery 2020. If it's true that America systemically discriminates against black people, in every institution, it's set up for their failure to deny them equal rights. If that's true, then actually you can make a moral justification for burning things down to defend your own life and rights, but that's not how America works. But do you understand what they were trying to offer an interpretive lens for leftists to understand the allegedly systemically racist culture today? That 1619 Project becomes podcasts, essays, and K-12 curriculum in America's public schools. 8 months after that project's released, George Floyd, right, St. George Floyd, right, the modern priest of the left who arrests pregnant women at gunpoint, right? All hail George Floyd. They were actually selling religious paraphernalia with his face on it, so I'm not actually just joking. It's like he was treated as a saint. And so therefore, we have to burn and pillage because America is so systemically racist. Then people started calling the riots of 2020 the 1619 riots. Because it makes sense. If the claims of the 1619 Project are true, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then the author of the 1619 Project on CNN was asked, how do you feel about the riot, the mostly peaceful protest?
being named after the 1619 Project. She's like, I'm so proud. This is wonderful. And then, because revolutions always eat their own eventually, it's just hilarious, so fun to watch. The radical BLM Antifa 1619 disciples started going after corporations, institutions, and countries that resembled racism, right? Remember Aunt Jemima? Remember you had to cancel Aunt Jemima? Like they were going after all these corporations and institutions with any vestiges of racism, which is hilarious because if that's true, then let's start with Planned Parenthood. Right. And so the left in 2020 went after Planned Parenthood. Not pro-lifers. It wasn't Tucker Carlson, Glenn Beck, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles that got Planned Parenthood to cancel their founder. In the summer of 2020, July of 2020, because radical pro-abortion Marxist leftists started attacking Planned Parenthood. Like Christians did not pay attention to when this happened. This was like a cultural linchpin of our civilization, this event that happened July of 2020. And they said, your founder was a racist pile of human vermin, a racist, a eugenicist. And so the Planned Parenthood of Greater New York director, Karen Seltzer, came out. Of course, her name's Karen. It's kind of funny, but anyways. And she says, we're done making excuses for our founder and the damage that she did to communities of color. End quote. And then the Manhattan, New York City flagship Planned Parenthood clinic was called the Sanger Health Center. That was its name. They took her name off the building and they canceled her and they renamed the building. Then New York City, on the corner at which that Planned Parenthood Manhattan Sanger Health Center sat, there was a sign saying, this is the Margaret Sanger Square. And the city took that sign off. So New York City cancels Sanger, and Planned Parenthood cancels their founder, takes her name off the building, said she did damage to communities of color, and aborts her and throws her in the trash like they have the 25 million other unborn children since 1970. Now, anyone with 2 brain cells left to rub together would be asking a very simple question after observing what happened July of 2020. What were you hiding? What's the real story behind Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood? Because don't you understand, the liberal establishment and the mainstream media and the legacy media, I call them journalistic prostitutes for the culture of death, but I digress. They have defended Sanger for decades. Who remembers, like if you're older than me, who remembers watching the coverage of Sanger over the years? By universities, by like left-wing, progressive journalists, by books that were written about these people. Like Sanger was defended. I mean, Hillary Clinton got the Margaret Sanger Award, y'all. Like the left created the Margaret Sanger Award. I hope you understand that. Okay. Hillary got it. And she was like, she was breaking through glass ceilings and taking on stereotypes. And she said, when I think about what she was facing and what she was fighting way back then, I'm just so inspired and in awe of her. Like these were the things that Hillary Clinton was saying on the day she received the Margaret Sanger Award. Okay, like this was a woman that the left defended, celebrated, and sometimes they said, yeah, she had some friends that were kind of like racist eugenicists, but like she herself wasn't. And Planned Parenthood was just a way to help poor families plan their parenthood. She wasn't a racist. Then why'd you cancel her? You understand how significant that event was, July of 2020? You defended this woman for decades, then you cancel her and rename the building. If I'm a left-wing, lifelong voting Democrat who's accepted the talking points that Sanger was a feminist slay queen, I'd be a little bit upset. I'd be like, have I been lied to then? 1916, the first Planned Parenthood clinic opens in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York, an area heavily populated by blacks, Slavs, Italians, and Jews. It was a poor immigrant community. The first Planned Parenthood clinic opens in 1916. She breaks the law when she opens it, and that becomes the first physical manifestation of the ideas. And you can read these ideas, and I've read them for you, I memorized it, and I'm coming out with a movie in May of next year called The 1916 Project. It's not the 1619 Project that allegedly explains the insanity of our culture in this moment. It's the 1916 Project. That's the first building and the first physical manifestation and unfolding of the ideas that before that point she was just writing about, she was just speaking about. and then she put them into action. That's the beginning of the largest, best-funded, most profitable 501c3 in human history, and the largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in America, and behind all of the porn in the classrooms and the titillate the kids and incite them to a sexual frenzy, porn and gender delusions in most of America's public schools today. Planned Parenthood is not just behind it all, they actually helped architect almost all of that. They are not an abortion organization, and they never have been. They're a humanist, Darwinist, neo-Malthusian culture of death organization that has seemingly been behind every new iteration or unfolding of the culture of death over the last 50 or 60 years in America. So when Planned Parenthood cancels her in 2020, it's time to start asking some questions, y'all. It's time to start going back so we are not destroyed for lack of knowledge. In 1914, Margaret Sanger publishes her first magazine. It was called Woman Rebel, with the tagline, "No gods and no masters." No gods and no masters. Can I just tell you, that sounds a lot like, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened and ye shall be as gods. Saying no gods and no masters is actually identical to saying I shall be as gods. I was in DC in January for the March for Life, and I go ahead of the March for Life to find the Moloch Baal worshipers manifesting their inner transgender Moloch legions. The reproductive health advocates defending feminism. Freudian slip, sorry. It's when you say one thing but mean your mother. And so I found them. I found the Moloch worshipers, and they're pushing this cart and their megaphone and the trans flag and the rainbow thingy and the abortion stuff. Why is it that it always all goes together? Why is it? Why is that? Why is that? The people on the left, part of the revolution, always support the same stuff. Their religion apparently is large enough to inform their support of their pagan sacraments and liturgical feasts. But evangelicals in America bicker and moan and whine and argue about whether the gospel really speaks to all of the issues unfolding in America. So I don't talk to that because I'm Brian Broderson, and so I'm going to teach critical race theory from the pulpit and call it Christianity. Sorry, if you have to leave, it's okay. Right. I'm Rick Warren, so I won't have Jack Hibbs preach on a pulpit, but I'll have Obama. I'll host Obama at Saddleback. I'll have Ed Stetzer, the new dean of Talbot Theological Seminary, who votes for the people who kill babies, who ran the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Ed Stetzer, who was the biggest fan of Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health, who put Francis Collins on his podcast and told the church to go get the jab. Ed Stetzer, who was the dean at Wheaton. Ed Stetzer, who wrote an article in USA Today in 2021 that was titled, "If you love your neighbor, you have to get the vaccine." So if you don't love your neighbor, and you're a bad Christian. Ed Stetzer, the new dean at Talbot Theological Seminary, who has an open invitation to speak at both Mariners and Saddleback. Apparently, the gospel of modern evangelicals in, I call it Big Eva. You heard of Big Pharma? There's Big Eva, big evangelicalism. The institutional managers of evangelicalism who want their place at the table. They want Christianity to be respectable. And they seemingly can't figure out whether the Bible and Christianity and the gospel speak broadly enough to all of these issues. But not so with the left. Their religion of humanism, progressivism, Darwinism, call it whatever you want, why does it always cause them to support all the same stuff? Like, they almost never argue about, like, their real sacred sacraments. Transing the kids, sexualizing the kids, killing kids, ruining parental rights. Like, why do they always support all the same stuff? So when I find this little cart in the Moloch worshipers and the stuff, it's got all the, like, references to humanism because it all goes together. Anyways, there was a sign on this cart, and guess what the sign said? This was January of this year. No gods and no masters. What? 109 years later? 109 years later? The modern left and the Moloch worshipers in the abortion industrial complex quoting the words of their patron saint's first magazine. Maybe the culture war was just a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. Maybe all human conflict is ultimately theological. Sanger was very religious. It just wasn't pure and undefiled religion. The more you attack the family, God's plan for civilizations, Christianity, Western civilization, to try to rip it all down. Critical theory, right? Critical race theory, the Frankfurt School, Germany, critical theory. It's all bad, it's all evil. The 1619 author, you know, she was mentored by Angela Davis, the communist Marxist, who was mentored by the people from the Frankfurt School out of Germany, where most of the modern neo-Marxism premises come today, that is the modern left today. That's where that all comes from. We rip down Christianity, we tear down Western civilization, we destroy the family, and they think that they're evolving beyond the realms of religion. But they're actually just getting more religious. It's just a really weird, kooky religion. And it's not progressive, it's regressive. It goes all the way back to weird old pagan demon worship. Judges 6. Sexualize a community. They'll kill their kids. Won't be able to govern themselves anymore. Sanger gets indicted on 3 counts for breaking the Comstock laws. These were like obscenity laws. Did you know we have obscenity laws in America? Like, we actually have them. We just never enforce them. So some of that pornographic sex ed in the schools, and I'm not speaking hyperbolically, by the way. I look at the curriculum. I've gone through the comprehensive sexuality education in most of America's public schools. It's bringing all those moms and dads to school board meetings. And when one dad in Loudoun County, Virginia, just outside of Gary Hamrick's church, went to a school board meeting and got really upset. Why? Because his daughter had been raped by a dude who said he was a girl in high school. And the policy of the school board in Loudoun County, Virginia, allowed gender identity. Allowed a man who said he was a woman to go to the girl's restroom, rape this father's daughter. So yeah, he was a little upset at the school board meeting. Loses his cool. I think he cussed a little bit, got carried away. Yeah, how would you if someone raped your daughter and it was the school policy that allowed it? He gets pulled away in handcuffs, and the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, opened up an investigation into domestic terrorism of parents speaking at school board meetings. But all that sex ed comes from Planned Parenthood. And did you know that if I showed that curriculum that's in so much of the schools to your children in your living room, did you know you could call the police and have me arrested? No, completely. But if you take that booklet and you put it in a classroom, it's just science. It's just health education. Follow the science, you stupid rubes. I would like to ban that phrase from American political discourse. Follow the science. And the people that scream that the loudest at us for the last 3 years believe men can be women, women can be men, babies aren't persons, and children are sexual beings. I feel like the Princess Bride sometimes. I don't think that word means what you think it means. Right? This is inconceivable. So, what's my point? Those obscenity laws in New York City were being enforced at the time that we don't enforce today. So Sanger broke the law. So rather than getting arrested, because her magazine, by the way, that she was sending in the mail was stuff about the sexual liberation movement, birth control, she defended the need for political assassinations, it was really lewd, really crazy, right? So rather than getting arrested, she flees to England. She ships her 2 kids off to be raised by her friends. Shocker, the founder of Planned Parenthood wasn't a great mother. She has her socialist friends in the New York labor movement forge her a passport so she can flee. She spends 18 months in England, year and a half, and she meets the Neo-Malthusians. The Neo-Malthusians refer to Thomas Malthus. Ever met a liberal who believed there were too many people on planet Earth? That's like every Democrat in, I think, America right now. Too many people on planet Earth. Stop having kids. I mean, obviously, Mother Gaia. I'm sorry, the ecology crisis, another Freudian slip. I keep calling them demons because they are, sorry. And so, you can't have too many kids because if you overpopulate too much, the environment can't handle that many people. So that will eventually harm the environment. And so that will cause climate change. Right, so you're the problem from having too many kids. Do you know where that idea originates? Kind of like the first time. Thomas Malthus. He was the Anthony Fauci of the late 1700s. He believed he was just following the science. No, I'm not kidding. He called his theory scientific. Have you noticed how they always do that? No, it's just scientific that your 9-month-old baby could be a girl. So don't call it a baby, call it a baby. That's what they're insisting on right now. The modern left, they're asking you to call unborn babies not babies, but theybies, because it's a they-them. We don't know yet, right? The baby hasn't told us their gender identity. Wow, I'm really getting carried away right here. What time is it? Okay. So that goes back all the way to Thomas Malthus. There's too many people on planet Earth. So she meets the Neo-Malthusians in England, which are the modern disciples of Thomas Malthus, which is where the whole population reduction movement originates. Right? Which is like all of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Like, you could trace all those theories back to Thomas Malthus. And then in 1968, this guy named Paul Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Bomb. Have you ever heard of that book? Who was alive in 68? Okay. No. I mean, y'all are my sages, right? Like, I'm trying to learn from you. So I'm just saying, y'all remember this book? The Population Bomb. And he said, if the world doesn't drastically reduce its population over the next 20, 30 years, there will be massive starvation and millions will die. Okay? That's what he said. So that was in 68. I was born in 91. By the time I was born, the world population had more than doubled from when he wrote his book. Malnutrition was at an all-time low, and we were the fattest generation in American history. Follow the science. Paul Ehrlich sat on the board of Planned Parenthood. Why does it always all go together? Well, I'm trying to tell you the history, y'all, so you're not destroyed for lack of knowledge. She meets the Neo-Malthusians when she flees the authorities in New York City, the modern disciples of Thomas Malthus, which is where Paul Ehrlich gets all his bankrupt ideas from the first place, and it's all scientific. Okay? Then she meets a man named Havelock Ellis. Who's heard of Alfred Kinsey? So, Havelock Ellis was the Kinsey of England. By the way, the film coming out, the 1916 Project, in May, and my book in May is going to connect all of the dots. Nothing's ever been done like this in the fight for life before, or frankly, the conservative movement. It's going to rip your face off. It's going to cause you to worship God and write me big checks. No, I'm just kidding. And we're going to screen this at churches all around America. And this film is going to wake up the church. It's going to be incredible. We got Eric Metaxas in it. We got Jack Hibbs in it. We got John Amanchukwu in it. We're filming outside of Germany, outside of death camps. We're filming outside of the first Planned Parenthood clinic in New York City. Like, we're putting all these pieces together, okay? But, and when we're talking about Kinsey and his role in the culture of death, because it all goes together. Anyways, I brought up Kinsey to say that, like, Havelock Ellis was the Alfred Kinsey of England. He was a sexual deviant. He himself was impotent, so he was always trying to find new ways to get excited. That's a PG-13 version. He forced his wife into lesbianism. He hosted orgies in his home. This is Havelock Ellis, okay. Guess who begins a raging affair with the founder of Planned Parenthood? Margaret Sanger, Havelock Ellis. They begin an affair. Okay, so remember, someone's raising Sanger's kids back in New York City. Okay. He then writes about his sexual experiences with Sanger in bed, forces his wife to read them, and drives her insane. No, this is all true. I've researched all this for you. That's what Sanger's doing 18 months in England before she founds Planned Parenthood. Havelock Ellis was mentored by a man named Francis Galton. Francis Galton coined the term eugenics. Eugenics, the root word, means good in birth. So what does that mean? Some people are not good in birth. So if you're thinking of Mao Zedong, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, good job. That's all eugenics. Eugenics believes that there are like superior races. There are certain good genes that we need more of for this Übermenschen, not Untermenschen, Übermenschen, this super race, this master race. And it's the mentally and physically defectives, disabled, Black, Slavs, Italians, and Jews. I mean, they're not all bad, the eugenicists would say. They would say they just tend to birth kids that are not good for the strengthening of civilization. Right? This is all eugenics. The guy who coined the term is named Francis Galton. He's the modern father of the eugenics movement who mentored Havelock Ellis. Francis Galton's life was forever changed when he read his cousin's book, Origin of Species, by Charles Darwin. Oh, light bulbs. Survival of the fittest, so might makes right in the religion of humanism. The strong will survive, and the weak will die. Because if we're all animals and it's an animal kingdom, what happens in the animal kingdom? The strong survive and the weak die, even if the strong have to kill the weak in order to survive. So Darwinism inevitably and necessarily leads into eugenics. And how wild is it that not only did we go from Darwinism to eugenics that quickly, it happened in the same family. His cousin, Francis Galton, coins the term eugenics, is the modern father of the eugenics movement, who mentors Havelock Ellis, the sexual deviant Kinsey of England weirdo, who becomes the #1 political and sexual influence on the life of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Wow, we went really quickly from the premise, man is a monkey and an animal, to eugenics, to sexual chaos, to child sacrifice. Libido dominandi, sexual liberation is political control. Sanger understood better than any other modern leftist revolutionary that the sexual revolution has to always come before the social revolution. Because in the early 1900s, America was a largely Christian society. Not everyone was saved or regenerate, of course, but they were still functioning off of a morality that they were borrowing from the Christian worldview. America was largely moral in their ethics, and certainly their sexual ethics in the early 1900s. So the people are going to be immune to this sexualization of the culture attempt that the modern utopians were trying to usher in if they're moral and virtuous. But that's why you got to titillate the masses first. That's why you got to get people to just indulge those animalistic appetites. Because once they do that, they can't govern themselves anymore. The sexual liberation always comes before the social revolution. Marxism, communism, totalitarianism. Libido dominandi. She comes back to New York City in 1916 and opens up the first illegal, unlicensed birth control clinic in the Brownsville section of New York. The first Planned Parenthood. The beginning of what is today the largest, best funded, most profitable 501c3 in human history, who is not only helping institute or unveil all of the death in America, but is funding it and profiting off of it. That's the beginning. That's the date in the window to understanding this culture, maybe more than any other date in the last 120 years, and certainly more than any other individual than Margaret Sanger. Well, she needs help. One woman can't do this, so she founds her organization, the American Birth Control League, in 1921, later renamed Planned Parenthood. When she founded it in 1921, her first board member was a man named Lothrop Stoddard. Lothrop Stoddard was a high official of the Massachusetts Ku-Klux-Klan. He wrote a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And then his other book was called The Revolt Against Civilization, The Menace of the Underman. The Menace of the Underman. Who's the Underman? Blacks, Slavs, Italians, and Jews, and the mentally and physically defective. That's like the first board member of Planned Parenthood when it was established in 1921. And if you Google the name Lothrop Stoddard, you will not find this. I've done it for you, but there's been a concentrated attempt to bury, to veil the history of liberalism and progressivism today. Because they walk in the same intellectual and political tradition as these demons. And if the entire society began to understand the history of these ideas, I believe the liberal establishment would begin to collapse in on itself like a dying star. Lothrop Stoddard, whose book, The Menace of the Underman, was translated by Adolf Hitler's chief racial theorist, Alfred Rosenberg, and that's where the Nazis got the term Untermensch. Ever heard of Heinrich Himmler? Yeah, he wrote a Nazi propaganda book called Untermensch. It means subhuman. It's what they called the Jews. The Nazis got the term Untermensch, subhuman, from the word underman, the menace of the underman, Planned Parenthood's founding board member's book. Excuse me? Well, why didn't Don Lemon tell me about that on CNN? Never learned that at UC Berkeley. Or Vanguard, for that point. Where are our Christian colleges teaching the next generation the history of bad ideas so they can be the sons and daughters of Issachar and ambassadors for Christ in a culture of death that needs the prophetic voice of the church? I went to Westmont College in Santa Barbara. I didn't learn any of this junk. Wasted who knows how many tens of thousands of dollars learning useless stuff that has not served me today. The only thing I got out of Westmont College was learning how to fight against progressive, syncretist political activists who call themselves Christians and use the veneer of Christian education to raise up the next generation of neo-Marxists who are preaching what Bonhoeffer called cheap grace. So unfortunately, I had to find the steel in my spine, not from a public university, but from a Christian one in Santa Barbara. When Planned Parenthood was launched in 1921, it shared office spaces with the American Eugenics Society. And all of the funding for Planned Parenthood in 1921 came from people like the Rockefellers, the Fords, and the Carnegies. And Sanger wined and dined these folks. I mean, you know, she got them to contribute and fund all this stuff. The American Eugenics Society, yeah, which was being run by Madison Grant at the time, who, interestingly enough, wrote his bombshell book the same year, 1916. And it was called The Passing of the Great Race. The passing of the, oh no, the great race. The Ubermenschen are passing, right? Because of the unfit, because of those undesirables. One day, Madison Grant's secretary, Leon Whitney, for the American Eugenics Society, this guy, Leon Whitney, he gets a letter in the mail one day from this German corporal, recently out of prison and rising in the German political scene, calling Leon Whitney's writings on eugenics so helpful to him. And so Leon Whitney, he runs over and interrupts a committee meeting for his boss, Madison Grant, who wrote The Passing of the Great Race, and says, Madison, our writings are influencing the Germans. This is awesome. This is recorded. Madison Grant smiled and chuckled and pulled out his own letter he had just received from the same German corporal, recently out of prison after his failed coup attempt in Munich, calling Madison Grant's book, The Passing of the Great Race, calling it his Bible. The man who wrote those letters was named Adolf Hitler. And in Mein Kampf, you can find entire paragraphs that have seemingly been plagiarized from Madison Grant's book, The Passing of the Great Race. So in 1934, Hans Gunther, he was a Nazi, he was part of the Nazi Party. Hans Gunther, he was a race anthropologist. In 1934, Hans Gunther called Madison Grant and Lothrop Stoddard the spiritual fathers of Nazi Germany. A Nazi intellectual who worked for Hitler said the spiritual fathers of Nazi Germany are Margaret Sanger's first board member, Lothrop Stoddard, a high official of Massachusetts Ku-Klux-Klan, and Madison Grant, who she shared office spaces with when she established the American Birth Control League in 1921. Madison Grant, who once put a black man in a cage with a monkey at the New York City Bronx Zoo to, quote, illustrate evolution. Go Google it. That black man's name was Oda Benga. O-T-A, Oda Benga. And there's a picture of a monkey holding on his neck to illustrate evolution. You know who funded that? Madison Grant, whose writings Hitler called his Bible. So when you hear people like Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, say that, hey, the abortion baby killing thing and Planned Parenthood, like, it's kind of like a Nazi-esque kind of thing. That's not a Republican talking point to rile up the base. I'm giving you the history behind why people say things like that. Happy is he who knows not only the hidden causes of things, but who has not lost touch with their beginnings. We have lost touch with the beginnings of the cultural rot, the bad seed that has birthed this culture of death. So the number one response I've gotten from godly pro-life conservative Christians at the 35 pulpits that I've spoken in the last 15 months is, Seth, I've never heard any of that before in my entire life. And these are conservative, pro-life, American-loving churches. If the people of God don't know, how can you defeat an enemy that you don't understand? How can you destroy an enemy that you don't know exists? Then in '64, Planned Parenthood's medical director launches SECUS, the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, SIECUS, the first group to create, to formalize, and to sell comprehensive sexuality education with all the weird, kooky, sexual porn stuff in all the classrooms. That gets formalized by Planned Parenthood's medical director, Mary Calderon, with seed money provided by Hugh Hefner. I wonder how that works. Libido dominandi. Sexualize the youngsters, and it leads to child sacrifice. As it was in Judges 6, so it is today. Oh, and their board member of SIECUS in 64? Wardell Pomeroy, Alfred Kinsey's homosexual lover. Well, one of his many. Sorry. I don't know if you know the history of Kinsey, but. Wardell Pomeroy, the founding board member of SIECUS, launched by Planned Parenthood's medical director. That's where all the comprehensive sexuality comes from that labels parents who oppose that domestic terrorists. Oh, and that makes sense because when Gideon walks out of the cave and he tears down the Baal statues and he tears down the Asherah poles, the Israelites and the Midianites wake up in the morning and they say, hey, Joash, Gideon's dad, hey, Joash, your son Gideon did that. Where are our altars? You destroyed our altars. Bring Gideon out that we might kill him. Oh, Seth, are you telling me that when the church wakes up and gives God a reason to show our country mercy and walks out of our comfortable little caves and start tearing down the high places, that the people who want to kill babies because sexual liberation has to always come before the social revolution will then call for the heads of the godly men and women who care more about God thinks about them than Joe freaking Biden? As it was in Judges 6, so it is today. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Who thinks the entire church should hear this message? That's why we're doing the movie. The book comes out in May to wake up the American church. The White Rose Resistance, as we close, is based on the story of an anti-Nazi Christian resistance movement. I don't have time to get into it, but isn't it interesting that with the history I just gave you, not only are we fighting the same fight that our German brothers and sisters were fighting in 1941, 1942, 1943, like the same ideological battle, but sometimes we're actually fighting the same people. Now, if you're like, wait, what are you talking about, Seth? Let me give you one example before I, go give you hugs in the foyer and say hi. Ever heard of the abortion pill? It's called RU486. That's the name. RU stands for Roussel-Ucloff. Roussel-Ucloff, French manufacturer, invents the abortion pill. Bill Clinton brings it to America in the year 2000. Shocker. Roussel-Ucloff has a majority shareholder named Hoechst AG. Hoechst AG emerged from the breakup of a German chemical company known as IG Farben. IG Farben was infamous for creating a cyanide gas known as Zyklon B, the gas used to poison Jews in Nazi death camps. So, Hoechst AG simply shifted from creating poison to murder Jews to creating poison to murder babies. It's the same company. Sometimes it's not just the same ideological battle, false religion, humanism, Darwinism. Sometimes it's the same companies because the church is in their caves and we need to be like Gideon. Walk out of the caves we've been hiding in and start tearing down every high place, which is why at the White Rose Resistance, we're hiring regional coordinators. We hired a director of the resistance. We hired a national coordinator of activism to get the church mobilized, inspired, hear the message, jump on board, follow me as I follow Christ, follow us as we follow Gideon and the saints who have gone before us, who cared more about pure and undefiled religion than their own reputations, than being invited to write articles by the Gospel Coalition, the New York Times, and Christianity Today. It's time to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'll see you on the battlefield. Now go out there and give them heaven, will you?